Hello and welcome to the Sound Up Seattle podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Seattle and Washington sports. I'm your host, Tyler Cartwright, joined as always by my co-host,
John Carey.
And we are here today with not a ton going on in the Seattle sports world, so what we're going to kind of do is shoot some ideas around, shoot some thoughts around about what's recently been going on, including Ichiro Hall of Fame, some Seattle Storm trades, some college basketball, all those sorts of things, and just kind of have a discussion about Seattle sports in general. We'll probably get a little bit of a deep dive into the Seattle Storm upcoming 2025 draft class and kind of what they might do for the future, just because it's coming up quick, and it's looking like it's going to be a fun one with the Storm recent trade that we'll talk about. So, anything to say, John, before we get started?
I can't believe how much better your lighting and background is than mine at this point. One of us looks like a pro and the other one looks like a scrub. I'm embarrassed. But,
dude, you just need a light in front of your camera and not directly behind your face.
I need my screens to be as bright as possible. Get that sweet, sweet white LEDs to help light up my face.
That's going to be my next Christmas gift for you, man. Just a ring light to put right over your camera on your computer. That's all you get. You're getting the TikToker treatment.
Well, you're glowing. You're glowing. So whatever you're doing, I want it.
Thank you, sir. All right. With all that being said, here is some Coyote Picnic. All right, John. How do you want to divvy up today? We've got a lot to talk about. I think there's one thing that we missed last week because we had a discussion about what did we talk about? Oh, Seattle sports storylines. Gosh, I'm forgetful. And so last week something big happened. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, let's dive in. All
right. Last week, one of the Mariners Mount Rushmore players made it into the Hall of Fame. Ichiro Suzuki made a near unanimous made into the Hall of Fame with a near unanimous vote. The lone voter Ichiro would like to have some words with, but let's just kind of talk a little bit about Ichiro, his history with the Mariners, and why he made it into the Hall of Fame on his first round on the ballot. So him and Mariano Rivera are the only two first ballot near unanimous Hall of Famers, I believe. I think Rivera was actually unanimous, and then Ichiro was the one vote off. So let's just talk a little bit about Ichiro.
Yeah, I guess just starting with, just because we already brought it up, the unanimous thing. Really disappointing he wasn't able to get it. I can't imagine anybody that didn't think Ichiro was worthy of a Hall of Fame bid immediately. But it is baffling that, Mariano Rivera is the only unanimous first ballot Hall of Fame choice of all time, which is just crazy considering some of the names that have come through the sport. So it's not that Ichiro is more deserving than, Ken Griffey Jr. or some of these other guys that were not unanimous choices, but disappointing to be so close to number 2 all time and to miss out on it, but very, very deserving of the Hall of Fame. Very exciting. You said one of the Mariners Mount Rushmore guys. I think it's a two-face Mount Rushmore. I think it's Griffey and I think it's Suzuki, and then I think there is everybody else. There are some great names.
You got to put Martinez up there. You have to put Martinez up there, I think.
Edgar, but see, I'm not even sure I'd put Edgar over Felix,
That's a hot take, brother.
There are some great names.
That's spicy.
To me, they are secondary behind Ichiro and Ken. I think those two stand alone. And then there's everybody else. But, regardless, a fantastic player, 10-time All-Star, Rookie of the Year, 10-time Gold Glove. He won the MVP, won All-Star MVP one time. So just, his stats are pretty ridiculous. He's the all-time leader in career hits when you include his Japanese career. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's kind of not even close. He has over 4,000 hits. I don't think anybody's crossed that threshold ever in Major League Baseball. And granted, they weren't playing in Japan for the first 6 years of their career, but either way, to have over 4,000 hits is quite remarkable.
Yeah, and he had, for what it's worth, 3,100 MLB hits. So
yeah.
we don't have to look too closely at his Japan career. The guy was just. See, and people wonder, it's like, John, why are you such an average guy? John, why are you such an average guy? It's because I grew up watching Ichiro bat a career 311, okay? And it was really, really good. So excuse me for wanting a guy that can just get on base all the time.
Oh, yeah. Ichiro, just as, that was my guy growing up as a kid. It was, him and Edgar and Mike Cameron, that kind of 2001 to 2004 era of Seattle baseball was my founding years. And so, yeah, Ichiro was obviously the dude I as a lefty hitter, and John, you're a lefty swing as well, but you're left-handed, so that's also a little different. But I mimicked him in every facet of my game. I was a right-handed guy hitting left-handed. Like every time I would come up to the plate, it was like right hand out, bat vertical, just all that good stuff. So it was just really cool to see him get in and to see the sport of baseball really appreciate him the same way we did. It didn't feel like it growing up, and the fact that changed over the last decade or so feels like a really remarkable thing. And maybe we're a little young. Maybe when Ichiro came over, there was a lot of hype and all that kind of stuff. People were really that excited about it. But to me, it didn't feel like it carried as much weight until later in his career, which I thought was really cool. So just a cool note for Ichiro, and really happy for the guy.
That, everything you just said is true. He's a 5'11" guy that was fast, but not a freak athlete in really, any regard. What he was able to do, at his size and at his weight, was inspiring. It was honestly, a lot like Steph Curry. Not quite as flashy as Curry was, but really a guy that every single kid in America could look at and say, why couldn't I be Ichiro? A lot of people can look at Barry Bonds and be like, that's not me. But everyone can look at Ichiro and be like, that is attainable. So, certainly an icon in that regard. I just wanted to touch on something you said, because it's kind of funny. You were saying, you kind of needed to get later into his career to appreciate his greatness. You didn't necessarily see it right off the bat. I think it's worth noting that, and this might be a hot take because you know baseball history better than me, I don't think that there's an argument that anybody has ever had a better rookie season in the MLB than Ichiro Suzuki.
There's not an argument.
He came in 2001 when obviously they had that insane record. He had 242 hits, bat 350, was an all-star, was Rookie of the Year, Gold Glove, Silver Slugger, and won the MVP.
Dude.
While leading the Mariners to the best regular season record in the history of baseball. That's ungodly. He also followed that up with, he was an all-star all 10 of his first 10 seasons in the league, going up to age 36. He was a Gold Glove in every single one of those 10 seasons, a Silver Slugger in 7 of those 10 seasons, and finished top 25 in MVP voting in every single one of those seasons except for 2005. So, just unbelievable. And, there are some people it's like, oh, just 10 years? He was 36 by the time this run was ending. So, yeah, the whole idea of like, oh, you can't really count what was happening in Japan. This guy came into the MLB and completely dominated until his body started falling apart at a completely reasonable age. There's no reason to think he wouldn't have been just as good at 25.
This guy played, and we can count the 2019 season or not, but he played until he was 45. Like, this guy had the longevity of guys like Tom Brady, LeBron James. It was just kind of before that time when longevity really mattered. And he also, didn't have as big of an impact when he was playing for Miami and New York. He was 39 to 44. Like, that just wasn't the time when he was doing the most work for those teams. But I still just like the way that he went about the game, the way that he came over at 27. He was the first real Japanese position player to come over and prove that they could do that. It's still tough for position players to come over from Japan, but he was the first one. He kind of created this wave of the Hideki Matsui. Now you've got is it Seiya Suzuki on the Cubs?
Correct. Who's awesome.
You've got who's the guy on the Red Sox right now? I forget what his name is, but he came over and just had a good start and then just kind of fell off defensively. It's it's really hard to make that transition from any sort of other baseball league to the MLB, especially the Japanese and Korean leagues. It's to make that transition is really hard. You don't see it from a lot of people, and he was easily the best Japanese player to have ever come over at this point. Now you've got Shohei, who can argue for that spot, and probably by the end of his career will have overtaken Ichiro in that regard. But Ichiro paved the way, which is just a super cool thing for him to do.
There's no doubt about that. He was kind of like Dirk in the NBA in terms of we kept having these Europeans come over and flop, and because of that, just nobody really believed in these guys coming over until Dirk came in and said, showed everyone, no, you can actually bring in a European who's played, overseas, and he can be really good in this league. And that really opened things up for European players. Ichiro did the exact same thing. Worth noting just in terms of longevity, Obviously, his last All-Star was in 2010, but in 2016, at the age of 42, he batted .290 on the Miami Marlins in 143 game appearances. So this guy was playing a lot of baseball. He logged a 1.6 WAR at 42. Yeah, I love Ichiro.
Yeah, what a guy. And still continues to be a Mariners legend, and is at the clubhouse all the time, helping those guys. So
Yes.
just love his role in Mariners history. And I really do think that Ichiro is probably the number one face of the Mariners. If you look at the Mount Rushmore, I do think it's like Ichiro, and then you've got the tier of like, I think Griffey and Edgar are kind of the same tier, and then you've maybe got like a Felix, not really a Randy Johnson, but like those kinds of guys.
Yeah.
Ichiro is kind of in his own tier in that way. And he was a Mariner basically the entire time. He was great, and he ended up wanting to finish his career as a Mariner. Griffey left for those few years to go play for the Reds, which is why I kind of discount his Mariners greatness a little bit and put him on that same tier as Edgar. But Ichiro, just what a guy. Came in 10 straight All-Star appearances until he was 36, and like you said, fell off a little bit, but just kept grinding, kept staying with baseball, and we all love him for that.
It's worth noting, we're a couple of, kind of like millennial / Zoomers, late 90s kids. Ken Griffey, he belonged to our parents. He's kind of another generation. And we saw the highlights. We saw how great he was. His stats are unbelievable, obviously. Which one is actually the greatest Mariner is, an interesting debate. But Ichiro was our Mariner, and nobody has come close since, just in terms of, he started when we were 4, and he finished his Mariners career when we were in the middle of high school. So, we really grew up with Ichiro doing what he was doing in Seattle. So, obviously, tons of love from us and from our generation. I just got to say, too, I'm just so glad he came back at the end, too.
Yeah.
He loved his time here. The team and him decided to part ways, in the early 2010s, and that was a bummer, but, understood by both sides. I'm just really glad that there weren't bitter feelings on either side, and that he was able to come back and end his career as a Mariner, and that, he'll always belong to us. He came and he left, but, nobody else is like, oh, Ichiro's our guy. It's not like Miami or New York is saying like, oh yeah, Ichiro's ours. He even though he spent the last 6 or so seasons away from Seattle, he is undoubtedly and fully a Mariner, and that's really cool. That's something that's like, Randy Johnson, one of the best to ever do it, and he did some great things with us. He belongs to us about as much as anybody, but he doesn't belong fully to us. He's also a Diamondback. He wears a lot of hats.
Yeah, I guess we could move a little bit into the Felix conversation about whether we think he's going to make the Hall of Fame. He, I think, had a little bit over 20% of the votes his first season, so he's going to stick around. We'll see how his journey into the Hall of Fame progresses. Obviously, as Mariners fans, we would love to see it. His peak was definitely one of the greatest. Didn't have the longevity that everybody kind of wanted him to have and stick around with the team, because he was kind of on his own for those early 2010s into the mid 2010s, and he was our guy right after Ichiro. It was kind of like they handed the torch to each other, and we'll see what happens there. I think there's a chance that he makes it, but it really depends on how baseball and the voters choose to define how they talk about pitchers, because as baseball's gotten, the more recent we talk about baseball, the less you talk about a pitcher's longevity and the more you talk about their peak, because it's more about optimizing right now. It's more about looking at the stats and just being better. And so we'll see how it progresses. I think Felix, if it does transition to that type of voting and it gets more into like, how good was your peak? How good were you? Felix won the Cy Young. He has the perfect game. He's got such great stuff, but we'll see how the voters change.
Yeah, I don't think it's a conversation. I appreciate your pessimism on that. I know that's typically my job, but I think there are 3 factors really pushing towards him being in. The 1-2 punch you already said. I don't know this, but I can't imagine that there is a MLB pitcher who has a perfect game and a Cy Young to their name that won't make the Hall of Fame. Those are both just, obviously one is a big deal. The other is a smaller scale, but a huge deal just in terms of how rare they are. But in terms of people that have checked both those boxes, I'm not sure any of those guys aren't making the Hall. And the third thing is, which I think helps bridge the gap to what your point is, which is that Felix's peak was truly one of the greats. He just didn't sustain it the way a lot of Hall of Fame pitchers have, is the fact that, it's kind of a franchise thing too. He is a hyper iconic Mariner. And, we're not a franchise that is, particularly because we're so young, but we're not filling the Hall of Fame with Mariners names. I do think franchises like that, get a little extra with these guys that just mean a lot to the franchise. I think Felix will get in because of what he has and because he was, and like Ichiro, really belongs to the Mariners. I think that's going to help his case.
Yeah, I agree. It's so much. I think Felix has the last perfect game, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was what I remember hearing this season.
Did some Oakland guy get it this like 2 years ago, or did that not happen? Did he? Just
I don't remember. I think maybe it was Severino threw one recently in New York. I don't remember
perfect
exactly.
Games are really hard, but I think
know
there's been one since then because I thought
I think it might have been last year.
Yeah, and then I think everyone was bringing up the Felix one because it had been the last one.
Yeah.
But anyway. That's kind of beside the point. But I love that we got on a Felix tangent. This was really a congrats to Ichiro. What an amazing career he had and on making the Hall. So props to him. Hats off. Seattle great.
Yes. All right. Moving on. Let's talk. What do you want to talk about next? We could talk a little bit of not sadness, but a little disappointment in terms of the Kraken, or we could talk a little excitement in terms of the Storm. What do you want to jump into?
Yeah, I do not want to talk about the Kraken. I have way too much to say about the Storm right now. The headline news, which I had not heard until you pointed it out to me, so thank you for that, is that the Storm are moving on from their all-star guard, Jewel Lloyd. It's a very interesting deal. It's going to be a lot to talk about, but it was a 3-team trade, and what happened is the Aces moved on from Kelsey Plum and acquired Jewel Lloyd. The Sparks traded the number 2 overall pick and got the number 9 pick and Kelsey Plum. And the Storm obviously lost Jewel Lloyd in the number 9 pick and acquired the number 2 overall pick in this upcoming draft. What are your first...
And what's her name? Lee Ueru.
Yes.
Just one final note to that. Yeah.
Lee Ueru, the 6'7" center, 6'7" Chinese center. Talented, young. She's only 25. We'll mention her when we're talking about what we acquired. But what are your first thoughts when you hear about this trade? I just gonna say my first thoughts was like, I can't believe that's all they got in return. And then the wheels started turning, and I was like, oh, that's a really good deal.
Yeah. I think the first thing that I thought of was, because I didn't hear the pick, because everywhere on Twitter was like, oh my God, Jewel Lloyd and Kelsey Plum have been traded. Like, nobody really talked about what the Storm got. And so when I saw that the Storm had the second pick, I was very excited because immediately my women's college basketball mind was like, do we have a shot at Paige right now? Is that like where we're at within that realm? And obviously if you have the second pick, like if somebody wants to skip over her, they can, and we can get her if we want. But, my mind jumped to like, okay, where do we want to look? What do we want to look at? Who are the top prospects in this draft? And then I was thinking, man, I'm so happy. Not so happy in the sense that like I didn't like Jewel Lloyd, but like Jewel Lloyd is. I'm trying to think of her NBA comp right now, and I'm just not gonna say one because I can't think of one. But to me, she was just so offensively minded, kind of
James Harden.
Yeah, I was going to say like James Harden, like heliocentric ball was kind of like her thing.
Yeah, Harden.
Luka was
You're
like
welcome.
right on the tip of my tongue. Yeah, but she just doesn't have the Luka type. But Jewel as a player, I respect her. She's a scorer. She does her thing. But I don't necessarily like. She's a great like Colin Sexton type when you think of. She's just able to score, and she can come off the bench and do that same thing too. But it's like I don't think she's going to be the person that can create for a WNBA championship caliber team. Like, I just don't think that she has that. And maybe the Aces can prove me wrong in that point. They've been great for so long, but Kelsey Plum was such a huge part of that. And me being such a Kelsey Plum stan, UW guy, I was shocked that they let her go. I know she's in, I think, the final year of her contract or second to last year of her contract. But either way, her getting traded to the Sparks, I didn't realize how old she was. She's 30, but her getting traded to the Sparks with Cameron Brink was exciting for me to think about, potential for her to continue her greatness in the WNBA. But yeah, really excited for this Storm second pick.
Yeah, just a lot of ground to cover on this one, honestly.
Yeah.
Why do we have to talk about the Kraken? I just want to talk about this one all day. But I guess I want to start this by saying, because, we're going to be talking about Jewel, and we're going to be talking about her in some critical ways. I just want to start by saying I love Jewel Lloyd, and I'm sad that her Seattle tenure is ending. She is certainly at this point in my mind the second best guard in the history of the Storm organization.
I mean, she's like basically only been the second. It's like Sue Bird and then her. Like that was the torch.
But the two great guards.
Yes,
I think she's a 2-time champion, 6-time All-Star, 3-time All WNBA, and she won the scoring championship in 2023. So she can ball. Jewel can ball, and there's no doubt about that. When we're talking about this trade, I just think this trade is so interesting too. God, I wish we had trades like this in the NBA, because this is like this is real star power. We're talking, MVP status players being moved here.
Yeah.
And they're getting older, but they're still, we're not expecting huge fall offs from Jewel or from Kelsey, but just like, let's just think about this for a little bit. So for the Aces, what they're doing is they're moving on from Kelsey and getting Jewel Lloyd. What does that mean? They're getting a little older at guard. Jewel's 31 to Kelsey's 30. And statistically, Jewel's basically the better player across the board. Jewel's a 2024, 20 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 1.5 steals. Kelsey's 18 points, 2.5 rebounds, 4 assists, and 1 steal. So, Jewel's basically better across the board in terms of shooting efficiency. Kelsey is the better player. Jewel's about a 40-35 compared to Kelsey's 43-39, so you're losing a bit of efficiency. And I think the main thing is, they're kind of a wash statistically. Jewel's is probably a little bigger, but Kelsey's thing is she just is just the icest of cold daggers in the clutch. Like, she just is a big shot maker in the truest sense of the word. And, once again, all love for Jewel Lloyd, 2-time champion. Can never take that away. That hasn't necessarily been her reputation in recent years. I know you and I have both expressed frustrations about some late game choices that Jewel's made in the last couple of years. So yeah, just an interesting move, I think, by the Aces. I want you to explain to me why you think this is a good trade for the Sparks.
The Sparks, and let me check to make sure that I'm right in this. Do the Sparks have the first pick in the draft this year?
You thought they had the first and the second pick?
No, the Sparks, not the Storm. The Sparks. It's Dallas. Dallas.
Yeah, the Sparks traded the number 2 pick. That's how they got Kelsey.
I guess that's right. Yeah, I'm dumb. But I think that there's a world where, it's Cameron Brink, who was a rookie last year, right? She's coming in. I think she had some injuries and just didn't play fully last year. And they're set up to, like, this is a pretty deep draft class in terms of guards. So they're set up to take a guard behind Kelsey Plum, have a really good opportunity. I've talked about this all the time on the pod, where I love players growing behind older players who have experience and can teach them things. And I think Kelsey Plum is the true, like, quintessential veteran. I think veteran point guard in the WNBA right now. It's like, that is who you want to learn from, especially for a young guard who is coming from whatever pick they will have now. Was it number 9?
Correct.
So yeah, I think they'll be able to grow. I think Kelsey Plum with Cameron Brink will be a nice combo, but I don't think that I think that this move comes because Kelsey Plum wanted off of the Aces. I think that was something that she had expressed previously, and so I understand that, and I think her being put on the Sparks will give her an opportunity to actually kind of do the Jewel Lloyd thing, score more, do kind of her own thing, and play with Cameron Brink and develop a rapport such that she can get a better contract and or get an extension with the Sparks in a city that she's, like, wants to live in and be comfortable there. So I think it just works for Kelsey Plum. The Sparks, they were really bad last year. Like you said, they had the number 2 pick. So they're not necessarily trying to get exponentially better. They're not going to try and make the WNBA finals next year. And if they do, that would be insane. That would show the talent of Kelsey Plum. But, like, I think this move was more to appease Kelsey Plum from the Aces side of things.
Sure.
And for them to try and maintain competitiveness by acquiring Jewel Lloyd.
Yeah, well said. On the Plum thing, the same thing was going on with Jewel Lloyd. She'd requested a trade from the Storm. Yeah. I'm glad they were able to facilitate that and send her to a place she would want to go. Just because, once again, we want Jewel to have good memories of Seattle. We want her to come back. We want to see her on the sidelines. So that's a good thing that both those teams did what was best for their players while trying to stay competitive. From the Sparks standpoint, I get it. Well, first things first, I'm sure Kelsey, they would not make that deal with Kelsey on the last year of her deal if it wasn't under the table that she will re-sign there.
Yeah. And
Kelsey, I'm sure, is like, she's probably in her LeBron era. She's like, I want to go to LA. I want to be a big draw. Winning championships would be great, but, I kind of just want to be the star of a team in Los Angeles, which, props to you. I get it.
She's got her own AD, man.
She does. White AD. White blonde AD. What I just find so interesting about that is, Kelsey might have another, 4 great years in her. That'd be fantastic. But she's 30, she's going to be 35 here pretty soon. And the history of players over 35 in the WNBA isn't fantastic. And then on the other side of things, to give up a number 2 pick in a draft as iconic as this draft, there are people talking about the 2025 draft being better than the 2024 draft. Obviously, Caitlin, everyone agrees, is generational, but look at some of the other top picks from that draft, and it's not looking like an automatic home run. The top 4, but also the top 2 in this draft is monstrous. We're going to talk about it here in a second, but to give up the chance. We've been seeing the WNBA really hit its stride in terms of each subsequent generation has been getting better and better. In the NBA, that's kind of like petered out, where, guys aren't really coming in that are like way better than Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
They can be as good as Kevin Durant, but they're not being way better. That's not happening. In the WNBA, these players coming in, Caitlin Clark is probably going to go down as one of the greatest guards, assuming she doesn't get eclipsed by somebody younger coming in after her.
Yeah.
So to miss out on some of these players for like 4 years of a big name is just surprising to me from the Sparks side. But what that makes me want to do is it makes me want to talk about who the heck we think the Storm are going to pick with this number 2 pick.
Yes. So what I want to paint for you is a picture of the Storm's future for this upcoming 2025 season and 2026 and onward, in terms of how the team will be constructed. So currently, on their active roster for 2025, they have Skylar Diggins-Smith, Ezi Magbagur, still don't know if I'm saying that name right, but I'm sure something like that. Jordan Horston, Nika Mule, Lee Ueru, and Gabby Williams. That's 6 players, and 3 of them are rookies, or were rookies last year, or coming in and are rookies. Like Jordan Horston was the only one of those people that had consistent playing time last year, and she was good in her stint. So that's something to look forward to for next year. But again, that's 6 players. In 2026, the only 2 players that are on their roster are Jordan Horston and Nika Mule. That means that they need to, and granted, they had 11 players on their roster last year. They lost 5. They're going to need to reconstruct. That's how the WNBA works. It's a lot faster paced in terms of team construction, and you kind of build it around 2 or 3 people, and it's kind of like the NBA. I guess it's very similar to that. But either way, this team needs to sign pieces still remaining in this offseason, and then they've got 2 picks who I think they're hoping are going to be players that they can add to this roster and be basically immediate impacts. Like you're saying, it's easier for the new talent coming in to the WNBA to have an immediate impact and be good, just because the level of play is growing so quickly. So that's kind of what we're looking for in terms of our number 2 pick, and I think it's very, very plausible that could happen. Let's talk about a couple of those.
Yeah, I just can't express how excited I am. It's just, it's one of those things where the top of this draft is gross, and it also just matches need. Like, I love the idea that, like, our best player, realistically, besides this draft pick we're going to discuss, is probably Ezi. And, the top 4 prospects in this class, they're not centers. They're all players that could fit really well next to Ezi, which is awesome. And then if we get a guard, super nice to have Skylar Diggins as kind of the old head veteran guard that can also play either. We could get a point or a shooting guard. Yeah. And Skylar is super flexible and can slide into either of those 2 positions to play next to whoever we get. We also, Jordan's kind of a flexible forward, but we can also get a 3 or a 4 and put them in easily. So it's going to be very easy to just pick the best player available, which is nice. It's nice not to have to worry about fit when you're looking at the top of the draft. So I want to talk about 4 players, and I want to highlight 2 of them. So I'm just going to run through them, and then I want you to give me kind of how you would rank them, your thoughts on them, however you want to present it.
Yeah.
I'm going to work up from the bottom up. Yeah, the way I would present these in ascending order, number 4 in terms of prospect rankings is Anissa Morrow. She's a guard for the LSU Tigers, 6'1", so good height, monstrous rebounder. She's averaging 18.5 points, 14 boards, 1.5 assists, and is shooting 53% from the field. Number 3 is Olivia Miles, a guard on Notre Dame. She's 16.5 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists, 53% from the field, and a solid 43% from 3 this year. It's a huge step up from last year. Her 3-point game's come a long way. I also just love 16, 6, and 7. That is dynamic. Next, I would have Paige Bueckers at number 2. Obviously the biggest name in this class. UConn guard. She's at 20 points, 4.5 rebounds, 4 assists, 56% from the field, 43% from 3. Just a real do-it-all offensive juggernaut. And then my number 1 pick in this draft is Kiki Iriafen, the forward from USC. She's 6'3", so providing a little more size than you'd get with a Paige. She's at 18 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, 51% from the field, 33% from 3, and is just a big, strong, powerful forward out of USC. So when I give you those 4 names, what's jumping out to you?
I think to me, the first thing that jumps out is Anissa Morrow from LSU. Her statistics, kind of to me, it's weird because she's labeled as a guard, but she's still averaging 14 rebounds a game right now.
And 1 assist.
Yeah, and 1 assist. It's like she's more of playing the power forward, small forward maybe, and just like has the size of a guard, but is just physical. And I just don't know how well that'll translate to the WNBA. That's just like the concern. Obviously, she's got great stats. People are projecting her to be just fine in the WNBA. But like that's my number 4 if I was going to rank them right now. So similar to you, but I just wanted to kind of talk through that. I do think Olivia Miles is a really good player. She's obviously, like you said, averaging 16, 6, and 7 basically right now, is a really good all-around player at the guard position. I do think it's kind of tough between her and Paige in terms of like the impact that they're having. Yeah, Paige is basically 19 and a half, 14 or 4.5 and 4. It's like she's a little bit better of a scorer and a little bit less of a distributor. And I think when you look at Jordan Horston is more of a distributing guard. And so that's why I think fit-wise, Paige is probably better. You can play with Skylar Diggins, Jordan Horston, and Paige, and they all can play off of each other. And I do agree with you that Kiki's a really, really nice player. I think 18 points a game basically, and 8 rebounds, 1.5 assists. Like she's just kind of a do-it-all player. I would like to see a better 3-point percentage just because in the WNBA, she's only 6'3", and like 6'3" is really not that big. She's going to need to be able to stretch the floor a little bit. 33, like 1 for 3 is really not that bad, but I would just like her to be a little bit better at stretching the floor. Yeah. All that is to say, I think she's a great piece. It's interesting because I feel like the interior pieces that we have in Ezzie and Gabby Williams are just like, they're great people to learn from, I think, but they also like take up so much space. Like and by space, I mean minutes and just like time on the floor. Like it'd be nice to be able to have Kiki come in and be that third option, kind of like I was saying with the Jordan Horston, Skylar Diggins, and whether it's Paige or Olivia. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like which rotation do you want? And to me, I'm a Paige guy just because the Storm lost their 2 highest scorers from last season. Like Nick is gone and Jewel's gone, and that's 34 points taken away from this team. And yeah. Paige, I do think, could come in and immediately be a scoring presence if the Storm wanted to be relevant next year. It's like if they want to build a little bit more, maybe they give her the Caitlin Clark treatment and don't put anything around her. Just kind of let the game play out and try and get another good pick. And maybe she'll carry us to greatness like Caitlin did with the Fever, or not. But either way, I like Paige more personally.
Okay. Yeah, in terms of fit, I understand why you'd say that. Obviously, if we got Paige, I would be incredibly happy. Paige is probably the more proven of the two, just in terms of USC is an absolute juggernaut this season. Yeah. And Kiki is the star of that team, but we've just seen Paige do it on the biggest stage before. So I would be very happy with Paige. I do think even just because like she's a much bigger name, and ticket sales, and all these things that teams think about. I think Paige is more likely to go number one. And I do just think, 6'3", it's not big in the NBA. A lot of these WNBA centers are like 6'7". So 6'3" is like a true small forward, power forward height. A lot of these guards are like 5'10", 5'11". So yeah, I'm not too worried about her size. I don't think she'll play the 4. I think she'll play the 3. So I'm not too worried about her minutes, bouncing up against our bigs. I think she'll slot in at the 3. We'll move Jordan to the 2, Skylar Diggins at the 1. And I just think two things. One, we're getting the advantage in this case of that she's having statistically a down year from last year. At Stanford in 2023, she was 19.5 points a game, 11 rebounds, 2.5 assists. Field goal percentage was exactly where it was now. So obviously, she's probably having more of a down year because she's surrounded by even better teammates.
Is it Juju Watkins, right? Is at USC, if I'm not mistaken?
Correct.
Is that who it is? Okay.
Yeah, Juju's there. So eating into her ability to dominate the ball. So it's a good situation she's in right now, but we're seeing her statistics fall because of it.
Yeah.
And she just has, when we look at the WNBA, these guards like Jewel Lloyd and these guards are super important and are very often the second best players on these championship winning teams. But the teams winning the championships are built around these wing center types in the WNBA currently. Brianna Stewart, Asia Wilson, Candace Parker.
I was about to mention them, yep.
Yeah, gone now. But just like the best players on the court are players with a little more size. And Kiki has that size, and just, watching some of her highlights, she's just so like strong. She plays so physically around the basket, really attacks the basket, is really good at absorbing contact and finishing around the rim. And I just think, there are parts of Paige's game that, I'm sure Paige will be fine at the next level, but she's just a little smaller. She's not very big in terms of weight. Her shooting is going to help her out a ton, obviously, but I have no concern about Kiki's game translating. She's just going to be better as she continues to, physically develop and get stronger and practice. Hopefully her 3-point shooting develops over time. There's no reason to think it wouldn't. I think in 5 years, we will all agree that Kiki was the best player in this draft. So the fact that I think very likely she'll fall to number 2 is a big deal.
Here's my, just kind of going against the grain a little bit with you there. Do we think that the WNBA is shifting a little bit into more guard heavy stuff in terms of guards being the weight carriers? Because the three ball was really not that great in the WNBA for quite a while, and it started to kind of come back around, similar to what happened in the NBA in terms of stretching the floor. Obviously, guards became super prevalent in the 2010s with Steph and Dame and guys like that, and so with Caitlin coming in last year and being so dominant right away, that's a very rare case. But there's a case to be made for a player like Paige or Olivia Miles, where it's like these players could be good and they have a much better ability to stretch the floor right now. And I think if the game goes that way, it'll be much easier to piece together your quote unquote big men in the WNBA versus trying to find that generational type guard talent, which is why I would jump on Paige personally if the opportunity was there.
If they were
I'm not
both
saying that
available, sure.
Yeah, if the opportunity was there, I think I would happily take Paige over Kiki. And maybe some of that is the name power too. It's like Paige, the presence that she's had in college basketball just college basketball and just kind of like the basketball sphere recently has just been very, very welcome. I think by a lot of people, and she's done a good job handling that. I think she would do really great as like the star of a franchise. So
yeah,
I like you said, Kiki, I would not have any qualms with. I just think in terms of building your franchise, Skylar Diggins-Smith is gone next year. You've got basically, are you going to ride Jordan Horston and Kiki for the remainder of their careers? Are like those your two building blocks, or like where are you looking to build? And that's why I would look to Paige.
Okay, yeah, a couple things on that. Those are great points. I still just think, and guards are super important. Think about how good Sabrina Ionescu was. Some of the huge shots she hits down the stretch for the Liberty as they won their championship this year. Kelsey Plum on the other side with her big performances. So these guards are massively important. So even if you're not getting an Asia Wilson, getting a Sabrina Ionescu is a huge deal. So yeah, and also, I love Paige. She's great. She would shoot hoops after practice with Jalen Suggs and Chet Holmgren. So obviously I love Paige Bueckers and would love for her to be a Seattle athlete, follow Jalen to the West Coast and build a legacy here. I get what you're saying too, of like, Paige is probably the safer prospect. If I got the choice, if the Storm had the number 1 pick in the draft, yeah, I'd probably pick Paige and not think about it too hard. Especially because she's not 5'10". She is a true 6 foot, so I'm not too worried about her size. But I do still think Kiki has the higher upside, just based on her physical abilities and her balance and hang time and her ability to finish around the rim. And I do also think, I believe this very truly, as we have seen women's basketball get more and more competitive and more good, it's a lot easier to get a sweet shooting, 5'11" guard than it is to get a really strong, balanced, athletic forward. And that's just basketball in general. That's NBA, that's WNBA,
that's fair. Yeah.
That's anywhere you look. Between the two of us, both of us did a lot better shooting the 3 in high school than, finishing around the rim with high effectiveness. I'm going to go ahead and make an assumption about you there. I didn't do either at a very high level.
I don't know, man. I was dunking just the other day.
I bet. So I do just think it's one of those things, especially when you have a chance this high in the draft. If you see the vision with Kiki, I do think that's a harder skill to acquire than somebody that can shoot 43% from 3. But I also like players who shoot 43% from 3. So if we end up with Paige, I'll have a big old smile on my face. I just think it's crazy that we turned Jewel Lloyd and the number 9 pick, which is, a solid pick, potentially into Paige Bueckers and, a backup center that's 25 and is 6'7" and has a really good size. I just think it was a really, really good trade for the Storm.
Yeah. I agree with you 100% on that front. It's just some exciting stuff. I'm sure we'll hear more about it. We'll hear more about, see more mock drafts about who the Storm are going to take, things like that. There was some name that I saw on, was it Bleacher Report mock draft or whatever? I can't remember where it was that I was reading it, but it was not even one of the names that we just listed off. Like, there are so many good players coming into the WNBA this year that it's like, you're going to see a lot of content coming your way if you follow the Storm. So just keep your eyes peeled and see which one of us turns out to be right, because Kiki or Paige would both be great additions to this team. Yeah,
I'll bet you $10 that you wouldn't take the bet that those will be the top 2 players picked. I think Olivia and Anissa are both awesome, but I do think there are caveats to both of them where these top 2. I just think there's some great players in this draft. I think 2 stand above.
Yeah, it is interesting. I was thinking, like, there's a lot of discussion right now about the is it the Wooden Award in WNBA or in women's college basketball?
I do not know what the MVP award in women's college basketball is called.
Yeah, but it's Juju, who's probably not going to go pro because she probably makes more money at USC. Or there's like the Notre Dame girl who I don't remember what her name is, but there's like quite a few players who I didn't even see them on this list of potential people to be drafted. And just like that dynamic of staying in college to make more money is just very interesting to me.
Well, and I think women's college basketball, you have to stay 4 years.
Is that still the case?
Yeah, every single one of the 4 players we discussed is a senior.
I guess,
Caitlin played all 4, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
crazy.
So that's why, obviously, Juju would be right up there in this. She might be the number 1 overall pick if she could come out, but she will not be a class of 2025 draft pick.
Yeah. Well, either way, fun things to talk about with the Storm. Anything to say before we hop into a quick send-off for our boy from the Kraken?
Oh, yeah, good call. No, that's it. Excited about this trade. Goodbye, Jewel. Obviously, huge player when it comes to Seattle legacy. I hope she's able to compete on the Aces. The Aces should be really good again next year with her next to Asia, so I hope she has a lot of success.
Yeah. Wishing her the best and hoping that the Aces can be good, but just not great. The Storm are going to be
exactly. Second best in the West.
That'll move us into a quick Kraken discussion today. As John and I were trying to prepare for this podcast, trying to think about things to talk about, the Kraken put Phillip Grubauer, the goaltender from our crazy 2022 playoff run on waivers to send him to the minors. Kind of a tough stretch. Like it's like he lost his job to Joey Decord, and it's just been interesting to see not the fall from grace, but like the change in Grubauer, and just you see it so heavily in just like goalie confidence is what leads them to be better or worse. And I think Grubauer just lost his confidence over the last couple of years and has really struggled. I don't know that he'll make it through waivers, or I don't really know how waivers work in the NHL. But if I was another team with only one goalie, or like our backup goalie wasn't very good, I would put a flyer on Grubauer. Like Grubauer is still probably pretty solid. He just, like I said, lost his job to Decord, who's been really good for the Kraken. But it is tough. We both really liked him, and he was kind of our MVP coming out of that 2022 playoffs for us.
Absolutely, he had a tremendous run in that playoffs. Our defense was still pretty bad even during that playoff run, but he was just making some incredible saves. So I'm very sad to see what's happening to Grubauer. Hopefully he can still bounce back and either, present some value to this team in terms of they can move him for something, or he can bounce back and be a really good backup for Joey Decord, who has been very good. I'm happy with Decord, but yeah, I think it's hard to argue with the numbers. Grubauer is just in the middle of an absolutely brutal stretch. He's allowing 4.7 goals per game in his last 6 games. In those 6 games, the Kraken have gone 0-5-1, one tie. It's just been tough. It's been tough for Grub. I'm not super optimistic just based on the statistics this season. He's getting a little older, and goalies are weird, man. I still don't feel like I understand hockey to the point where I can explain goalie psychology the way that I can like MLB pitching or something like that. But yeah, there's something to it. It's a lot of confidence. It's a lot of, I guess it's kind of probably like goalkeepers in MLS or other professional soccer, where it's just, it's a little easier to really have it and then really lose it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of another sport or thing like that, and I really can't. Like maybe it's boxing. Like boxing, you have to have that swagger, and if you do, you feel great and you're on top of the world. But It's hard to sustain it a little bit. And I think hockey just has so many more ups and downs when it comes to it. It's like boxing, you fight once every 6 months. It's like it's just so different.
Maybe it's more like UFC. You see a lot of these people come in and they're just so much swagger, undefeated, and then they get knocked out once and they're never quite the same after. So hopefully that's not Grub. Yeah.
Well, either way, hoping for the best for him. Maybe he'll clear waivers and he can get kind of recentered in the minors. But just sad to see, and wanted to shout him out before we moved on from him in the Seattle Kraken zeitgeist.
For sure.
Anything else? Obviously, we're keeping an eye on the Storm. Any free agency signings, we'll definitely let you guys know. Anything else you want to talk about? Do you want to talk college basketball? Because
I do. I want to just touch on it. A real quick note on our 2 state schools. Wazoo, after a strong start in WCC play, has dropped their last 2 to Santa Clara and St. Mary's. Gosh, that St. Mary's game, they really had a chance. They were up 5 with probably 10 minutes left, and St. Mary's just did what they do down the stretch. But
yep.
Yeah, Wazoo's looked good. Tough Santa Clara loss, and would have been nice to get St. Mary's one, but we'll see if they can bounce back against Pacific tomorrow. I would expect that they will. UW has not won a game since we last talked. They are still without a win in Big Ten play with losses this week.
They got one. They got one against Maryland.
Oh, they did. I'm sorry. You're right. They won their first game of Big Ten play and have lost the subsequent 6, including losses to Oregon and UCLA over the last week. So, honestly, not horrible outings against either of those teams. Lost by 11 points.
I want to make a quick note
please.
About the Huskies. They just got Frank Kepnang back. The UCLA game was his first game back, and obviously he played a role in that one. Only losing by 5. That's a tight game, low scoring. Frank Kepnang is not a scorer, but he is a great, great defensive anchor. And I think we may see this Huskies team just turn into a little bit more of a competitive play as the season goes along. I just want to shout him out because he's been a guy that was missing after the first 2 games of the season, and the Huskies obviously did not do great with him out in Big Ten play. So we'll see if that changes much. It'll make Great Osibor have to do less defensively. He can focus more on the offensive end of the ball. A lot of good things come from him being on this team and being active on that side of the ball. So we'll see what happens. But he's averaging 2.7 blocks a game this season and is just like the ultimate shot blocker, I think, right now in college, in like Washington Huskies basketball history. Like, he's like one of those guys that at any point can rise and block any shot, and it'll just be crazy and exciting. So
yeah,
that's the guy that I've been missing all season. I'm hoping that his return will be a spark.
Agreed. You know what I think it's time for too, especially, they've been playing a little bit better in the coming weeks. Their losses have been solid losses, but if they really want to mix things up and do something kind of interesting, I'd move Frank into the starting lineup and move Great to the 4. Why not two towers this thing? Why not AD Boogie Cousins this thing? I think it's time. I think defensively, I think they fit each other well, just in terms of Frank is a better defensive anchor and Great's obviously a better offensive anchor. Great's shown that he can pass in the post when given the opportunity, and having another big down there might actually relieve a little pressure just in terms of opening up, the lob and other options for Great. Yeah, something to keep in mind, because obviously it hasn't been going well, so it can't get worse if you're trying something funky.
Yeah, we'll see how his knee holds up. I'm sure that they're kind of putting him in on limited minutes and just kind of letting his body get rejuvenated. Sure. But you're right. He is just like a great lob catching big man. He's not really a guy who wants to sit there and post up with the ball in his hand. Like, he's just like a pass catching guy, can distribute a little bit, but he's really just there to finish layups and easy dunks. So hopefully he and Great can have a good little tandem.
Yeah. Well, UW is going to try to get their second win in conference play against Minnesota, who's only 3-10 in the Big Ten. So it'd be nice to get a good opportunity at the second career Big Ten win for the new Washington Huskies. Last one I wanted to touch on, obviously big news for me. I may be wearing my Beavers sweater, but I'm here to talk about their downfall. Gonzaga, 98-60. Thwacking of the Oregon State Beavers. A big redemption game for a Zag team that has been stumbling of late. And a real prove-it game. This was, without a doubt in my mind, the second best game they've played this season, behind the season opener against Baylor.
Yeah.
Everything was working, both offensively and defensively. Graham Ike only played 20 minutes. He was 10 of 12 in those minutes. That's what I want from Graham Ike. I want him playing less and being more effective in the time he gets. Van Greg was solid, doing his thing all over the court. It was very interesting. Emmanuel Innocenti, the Italian national, got his first start of the season in this game. He only played 17 minutes, but he brought some good defense. Hickman continues to lead the team in minutes. Makes me want to hang myself from a light fixture. But the two guys I really wanted to shout out from this game are Caliph Battle and Michael Ajayi. Both these guys have been relegated to the bench. They've both been kind of infuse ill graces, mostly due to a lack of assertiveness in their minutes on the court. Obviously, Caliph has had some awesome minutes on the court, but he's also, he's just come out at times a little lackadaisical. Both those guys were awesome tonight. Caliph had 23 points. He was 12 of 13 from the free throw line, which is just something you never see as a Zag fan. And Michael Ajayi had his best game at Gonzaga. This was Pepperdine Michael Ajayi. 19 minutes, 6 of 10 from the floor, 2 of 3 from 3, 15 points, 10 rebounds, awesome defense. All that in 19 minutes. So this was... I'm really, really, really hoping that this was a sign of things to come from Michael, and showing that he's getting more comfortable in this setting, and kind of growing into the role that we'll ultimately need him to have. So it's just one game. They've got a lot of bad losses to make up for, but I was very, very encouraged by this one.
Yeah, I think you can look at that Oregon State, Santa Clara, those two losses, and just think, They probably had a little bit of a moment. Like the Portland game, they won that by 43 points. This Oregon State game, they won by 38. It's like, hey, maybe the light switch turned on, and this team is like, we're better than this. We should be playing better than this. And maybe if you figured something out with having those guys come off the bench and maybe staggering the Hickman and Nemhard minutes with the Ajayi and Battle minutes, maybe that's something that they've been trying to do. I don't know exactly what the plan will be moving forward. Obviously, this upcoming St. Mary's game is going to be indicative of how this team wants to play going forward, because that's going to be their toughest matchup in a little while. And I just think this team, we talked about it last week. I think just talent-wise, they've got so much talent that needs to come together for this team to be great. And there's still a world where this team figures it out and makes a deep run in the tournament. But it's like, this week could have been the turning point. So we'll see if that happens.
Yeah, still worth noting, they have 6 losses. I'm not here to make excuses for them, but they have 3 regulation losses, averaging 4 points less than their opponent in each of those losses, and they have 3 overtime losses. So they have yet to not be in one of these games at the end. They have just struggled to finish. So yeah, it has been very encouraging to see them kind of stomping some of these teams out, not getting down to those clutch minutes. Yeah, big game in terms of WCC play coming up against St. Mary's. That's this Saturday. If you're a Zag fan, tune in because they need this one if they want any chance at the regular season title.
You know what else I want from this Gonzaga team? I want Ben Gregg to be good against a good team because Ben Gregg just loves feasting on crappy teams. And I know he's your guy, but I got to kind of call him out here because he dropped 24 against Portland the other day. And it's like, yeah, it's 24 is a lot of points, but can you average like 12? Can this guy score more than just off threes? Like he just has not been a real creator ever, and he's just like his three maybe has started falling over the last little bit. I just want to see more from him because it's there. I think we both know it's there. It's like this guy could be a great 3-and-D guy, stretch the floor number 4. But he just hasn't been that, especially in big games. And so I want the St. Mary's game to be something of him like coming out, guns blazing, make some threes, just get hot because he's also like a very big confidence guy. And I think we would like to see more of that from him.
Agreed. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. His offense has been very come and go across the season, and it does tend to come against lower quality opposition. It's worth noting that Ben Gregg always shows up. The defense is always there. The effort's always there. Rebounding is always there. But he needs to hit some threes in some big games. He has clanked a lot of threes that would put us up 5 at the end of these games. And instead he misses and we lose a lot of these games. So 100% with you that particularly in a tight game down the stretch, I want to see a Ben Gregg 3 go in. But I do love Ben.
He's a tight butthole guy. Any game that's close, it's tough for him.
He just wants to go grab rebounds, man.
All right. Anything to say before I sign us off? I feel like that was a lot of stuff to talk about and not a lot of like main Seattle sports. We didn't talk Mariners a ton. We didn't talk the Seahawks. We didn't even talk the Sounders. I know everybody's been missing that discussion. Yeah. Anything to say before I sign us off?
No, quiet week, but Storm stuff is big on my mind, and we will see what things develop in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I think there will be some Mariners news on the horizon coming up in the next. Whether we may talk about it this week if it happens, but if not, definitely this upcoming week, and then if not, the week after.
For John, his sources.
For John Carey, I'm Tyler Cartwright. This has been the Sound Up Seattle podcast. If you enjoyed this episode of Sound Up Seattle, please feel free to give us a follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. We're now live on YouTube as well. I keep forgetting to tell people to subscribe if they watch these episodes at the beginning, but subscribe, do all that good stuff.
Please.
You can find Sound Up Seattle on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, all at Sound Up Seattle, all lowercase, all one word. You can email us your questions, comments, concerns about Seattle sports dying and the Mariners baseball field being just the worst in all of baseball at soundupseattle@gmail.com. You can find me, Tyler, at TyCart50, everywhere that's important, and you can find John
playing Red Faction Gorilla. What a throwback, classic. Oh, it's so good, man. One of my favorite video games. Super destructible world. You're a rebel on Mars. I love it. Play Red Faction Gorilla.
You heard it here first. Red Faction Gorilla.
It's got communist overtones. I just can't get enough.
How are you spelling gorilla? Is it G-U-E or G-O-R?
No, G-U-E. This is gorilla.
Okay. That makes a little bit more sense. I was like, a gorilla?
Yeah, it's a gorilla game, bro.
All right. I guess with all that being said, let's go Storm. Excited for this Storm season.
No doubt.